Hi, my name is Karen Bender, and I'm going to do a little talk about an essay and a list of tips for becoming a writer that I've used in my teaching and that have helped me in terms of becoming a writer. And I'm just going to kind of discuss them, and I hope they're helpful. So the first one is traits that a few of these traits you may become a writer, which is an essay that I wrote for LitHub. You can Google it, and it's you can read the whole thing. But I'll kind of summarize some of the basic points that I have in it. So I started thinking about what it takes to become a writer actually when I was a freshman in college at UC Berkeley, and I was in Tom Gunn's poetry class, which I was very excited to be in. But it was the last poetry actually class that I ever took because I was not a very good poet. But I really loved being in his class. And really what I loved is a lot of the things around his class. I loved being with other students and just listening to what they had to say. I loved imagining that I was a writer and kind of nodding thoughtfully when I wanted to kind of look smart. I loved learning about words and how they were put together. But I want to know, did I have it in me to become a writer? And so one day I had a conference with him, and I remember asking him, do you think I have it in me to become a writer? And for me, it was like asking him, am I going to live? Because I so wanted to become a writer. It was just what I wanted to be, and I didn't know how. And he said, he looked bemused and kind of tired, as though he'd heard this question many times. And he said, you have talent, it just will take a lot of work. For which I was annoyed at this answer. I wanted a yes or no. But unfortunately, he was right. It just takes a ton of work. So what I thought about is, students will come up to me, and say sometimes in this very, hopeful way, do I have it? Can I become a writer? And so I'll tell them some of these things I think are helpful. One is love of words. To be a writer, you have to love words. This is partly because that's what you're working with. What you're not becoming a sculptor, you're not becoming a dancer. You want to use words to express how you feel. And to a writer, words feel really alive. Like, for example, if you have a plum, here's a plum. The word plum, as a writer, you just suddenly, you feel that plum. You want to take a bite out of it. You feel its roundness, its redness, its coldness. It's very alive. You have, say, for example, William Carlos Williams' poem about, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you're probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. The word icebox there is just so beautiful. As a writer, you feel the ice, you feel the coldness of the plums. You have a word as a writer like wind. You feel, when you have a word like wind, you feel it. You really want wind, you feel it, you want it to be real. There's this wonderful quote by Virginia Woolf. She's talking about Shakespeare, and she says, Shakespeare, the word-coining genius, as if thought plunged into a sea of words and came up dripping. I mean, you think about that as we start out with thought and impressions, as babies, and we don't have language yet. And actually as we go through the world, everything we experience is impulse, it's thought, it's ideas, and then we transform it into words. And so you have to love words as a writer. You also, I think, love the architecture of sentences. You understand when you're reading a sentence if it feels rhythmic, if it feels like it's flowing. And also when it's clunky, like when you feel like stopped by the sentence, you want to make it better. And you like playing with them. Another thing is architecture of a story. You really like the way a plot, moves through a story. You feel an end, and it's just really resonant with you because it echoes of something happened earlier in a story. So all those things are important to becoming a writer because they're your tools, they're your craft. So that's the first thing. Another trait I think about as important to become a writer is a tendency toward extreme sensitivity, which I've been reading about recently, and there's a new definition called highly sensitive people. There's a quiz you can take online by a woman named Dr. Elaine Aron, who's studied this, and it has some questions that I found really relevant to to me and a lot of writers. Some questions are, I seem to be aware of subtleties in my environment. Other people's moods affect me. I have a rich and complex inner life. I am made uncomfortable by loud noises. I am deeply moved by arts and music. I make it a point to avoid violent TV shows. So I just like various things that in the quiz that show that you're sensitive kind of to your environment, and which can be difficult in life. To be a highly sensitive person, it means that sometimes you get rattled easily, or things can happen that affect you in a way that it's hard to kind of get past. But for a writer, it's great. Basically, to be a highly sensitive person as a writer means you're porous to the world, that you feel things, you feel other people's feelings, you feel you see things and they move you, and you feel your emotions really present. And I think that's important. I think if you crying at movies, I just saw a movie last night that was so moving to me, and I just was weeping. It felt like it opened up an emotional door in me. And I think that's a good thing for a writer, is to be that sensitive. So if you are a highly sensitive person and it's sometimes it's difficult in life, for a writer, it's good. So there's that. Another thing that's an important trait for a writer is openness to the imagination. This could apply to memoir writing as well, because the act of arranging real life on the page is an act of imagination as well. So for fiction writers, there needs to be a trust in the importance of imagining, and also basically the importance of the lie. In a way, as people, we exist in different realms. We exist in the logical, realistic realm of every day, and we exist in the realm of dreams. And when you have dreams, they're also real, but they're imagined. So when you're talking about fiction, you're talking about dreams and the importance of them. Science beginning writers will laugh when I tell them to lie. And I wonder if that's partly the fear of not being believed, or also the fear of not being good. And I think whereas, one should be honest in regular life, I think in fiction, you trust that the lie is actually getting to the truth. That in a good story, it's so specific and the dream is set out so clearly, as John Gardner says, a vivid, continuous dream of the story. You're in the emotional reality of it. And it's giving something emotionally true to the reader. So it's really trusting the imagination and valuing it. Milan Kundera says, the characters in my novels are my own unrealized possibilities. That is why I'm equally fond of them all and equally horrified by them. Each one has crossed a border that I myself have circumvented. So, your characters are, people say, they're afraid of revealing themselves in their characters. And the truth is, all your characters are you. They tap into some element of you. They're all some form of acting. But the idea is that because, they're taking a tiny kernel of you, but they're exploding it for dramatic potential. So everyone is revealing things when you write, which is why it can be scary, because you're vulnerable. But it's also a gift to the reader. The next important trait for a writer is a particular and relentless stubbornness. When a student comes into my office and says, I have to become a writer, then I know, in a sort of tantrumy way, I think that's good, because it means that they're very determined. It's very hard in our culture to become a writer, to say you're a writer, in a culture that doesn't value work that sometimes doesn't make a lot of money, you know, that sometimes feels like confusing to the reader, but it is real. It's real and it's so important. So I think what's important as a writer is to think about how do you just keep going, even if there are a lot of obstacles in the way. I mean, you're going to get obstacles such as people may not like your story when you turn into class. You may get it rejected many times when you send out to magazine. You may get rejected by agents. You may get, you know, bad reviews. There are so many places along the way where people will tell you no, or, you know, and I think as a writer, what you need to do is say, I'm going to do it no matter what. Now, the only caveat with that, because you do have to be stubborn and you do have to be, you know, just doing it every day, is you also want to be stubborn with an eye toward, with an openness to feedback. Because if you're stubborn in a way where you say, my story is done and it's great and no one's going to tell me anything otherwise, then you're not going to get better. So you have to be stubborn in terms of doing your work and say, I'm going to do this, but open to people that you trust saying, I don't think this is working like this, or I think you might need to think about this character, or, you know, maybe the beginning could be stronger. You really want to think about what you can do to improve something and make it better. So it's a particular type of stubbornness. It's not just, you know, it is just doing it because you want to do it, because you have to do it, even if people diminish it or, you know, make you feel bad about it in some way. But you also should be open to feedback if you want to get better at it. So there's a stubbornness that's important. And the final thing is one that I think is important too, which is the ability to delude oneself, which I told my students this once, they laughed, because obviously the ability to delude oneself is not helpful in many other aspects of life. You don't want to delude yourself as to, for example, how much you have in your bank account, or why someone is not calling you back, or something like that. But for writing, it's actually a form of cognitive realignment, I think, where if you sit at the computer and you say, I am a writer, or I'm a good writer, or I'm going to write a story, I'm going to write something, it's helpful because it is kind of a delusion. You know, when I sit and say I'm writing a novel, I mean, I'm writing it, but no one has said it's a novel but me. So it's kind of a delusion, but it's a good one because it gets me to do it and it gets me to finish it. And then it becomes a thing. So I think deluding yourself means delusion, just not maybe more imagining yourself as a writer. And also delusion as a writer to me means delusion plus diligent work. Because if you just say I'm a writer and you're just, you know, wanting to wear a beret or something, what you are doing is just saying you're a writer, but you're not doing it. So you want to be a writer and also be writing. So delusion plus diligent work leads to, you know, something finished. So those two things together are really good. So, so those are some traits that I think are important to becoming a writer. The, you know, love of words and story, and, you know, the way words are put together, openness to the imagination, stubbornness, an ability to delude oneself, and also sometimes, you know, hypersensitivity. And so all those things I think are helpful to becoming a writer. And then here I have my 10 commandments for becoming a writer, which I wrote when I was in my 20s, and I felt I was coming in contact with a lot of myths about what it was to become a writer. A lot of these myths were destructive, you know, things like you have to be a genius, or you'll be, you know, hit by lightning, and then you write something. And I always felt, well, that's not happening to me. So I wrote these as I was kind of trying to figure things out, and I feel like they've helped me. So the first one is write, which is kind of the sadly obvious one, that you can become a writer if you write. You can't just be thinking about it and one day you will write this great book. You actually have to sit down and start. So there's that. 2, create a writing schedule for yourself. Writing an hour a day or a page a day or every other day, whatever feels right. Try to stick to it, watch your work grow. This, I feel, is important because it actually helps you take yourself seriously as a writer. When you're writing, and we're all juggling so many things, along with our writing, work, family, so many things. But if you say, I can't write, but I can write a lot, all on one day, I can write 10 hours on this one day. I mean, some people do write like that, but I find it a lot of pressure, because then that one day, if you don't write, you feel bad and nothing gets done. And there's a lot of pressure on those pages to be really good. So if you have a writing schedule for yourself, say an hour a day or half hour a day or a page a day or a paragraph a day, what happens is it starts growing. And then you have, say you have a page a day, which it can be a lot, at the end of the week, you have 7 pages, which then means you can cut it to 1 page if you have 7 bad pages, or, and then you have 1 good page and you move forward. So the writing schedule leads you to volume, which then leads you to be able to throw out and edit in a way that feels easier. So the idea is, the more you can produce on a regular basis and just getting it as part of your day and part of your system, the better. I know also as a writer, people often don't take your writing schedule seriously. They, just want you to go shopping, or they want to go to lunch or something, because it seems like you're just sitting there. But you're not sitting there, you are working. So I think that, for years, I just said no to people, and I was working, and juggling, teaching and kids and all this stuff. And I remember once I went out to lunch with this friend, and it was just amazing to see all these people out to lunch outside, and I think one thing to think about is, just sometimes you sacrifice things, right? Maybe you don't, people are watching TV at night, or you're writing whenever, the other thing is you write whenever you can. I mean, I've always just tried to grab time to write whenever, and you try and find the time that's good for you. And again, it can be a little bit of time, but just if you can make it regular, because it means also you're taking yourself seriously. 3 is feel how it feels when the writing's going well. Remember that feeling. It will come back. This is a really important one, because sometimes writing feels really fun, and you're writing and you feel it's, really funny or sad or real. And sometimes you're writing and it feels like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. It feels really hard. Often I think it feels that way because of shoulds, because you feel you should, you're writing something because you should, or there's a sense of duty, and it doesn't feel organic. So, but remember the feeling when it's going well, because if you can tap into it, then it, it's almost physical. It's like a physical part of your body when you're writing well. You feel it sort of, I feel like here, like in my chest, like when it's going well. So I do think about it, like what, it feels like what it feels like when you're doing it right. 4, pretend you're a great writer. Do whatever you need to further this idea. Buy a scarf a great writer would write. Make up a great writer name. Write a line you think a great writer would write. Write a story you think a great writer would write. This goes to the whole idea of delusion, and the idea of how do you imagine yourself? How do you invent yourself as a writer? Because that's how you become one. It helped me to have a writer name. And when I published under Karen E. Bender. And that started when I was in elementary school, and I had really problems with cursive. And the letter E was like a big mess and had all these curly cues, and people would, other kids would call me Karen E. Bender, and so I said, well, that's gonna be my great writer name. So whenever I'd send out my stories, I sent them out as Karen E. Bender, and it felt like a relief because it felt not like me in a way. It felt like this other being who was a writer, and that was freeing. Like you can have your writer self and then you're also ordinary person self. So I think that is helpful. Just imagine you're writing a story that's a great story that you can imagine, you know, in some book or some magazine, and just imagine what you'd write. And sometimes I think that can help push you. Do not show your work to anyone who says things like, well, it's not as good as Shakespeare, or similarly, it's better than Shakespeare. Do not show your work to anyone who says, why are you doing this? Or why do you want to write about these people? Or anything that makes you doubt your work. This is important because you have to learn to protect your work as a writer. You know, there are a lot of people who may not be super supportive of your writing for many reasons. Perhaps they would like to write. Perhaps they're afraid that they're going to show up in your work, you know, or something. But basically what you need to do is learn who to show your work to that actually is helpful, and who not to show your work to because their feedback feels like it's stopping you. So learning to protect your work is important. Reread works you loved as a child. Read new works that people recommend. Don't feel you have to like a book because everyone else does. Okay, so this is an important one because writing is, of course, a conversation with what you've read. You write because you read something and you want to respond to it. You've somehow, you know, engaged with them this deep way, and you need to say something back to it. It's inspired you. So, so I think when you get stuck, especially, what you want to do is think about, look at works that you've loved and look at the sentences and think, why was this inspiring? You know, how did, you know, go back to that feeling of being, you know, like alive as a reader. And then, you know, see how that's helpful. I know when I was writing my first novel, Carson McCullers was super helpful to me. And she, you know, I just had her on my desk and I would look at her work when I felt really stuck. John Cheever was helpful at another time. You know, there are all the different writers can be helpful at different times as you write, because also as a writer, you're going to change and you may feel, you know, really drawn to one particular writer at one point of your career and then have another that you really love at, you know, different points. So reading is so important. Reading new works that people recommend, you know, stretch yourself as a writer. If you feel, you know, a certain writer you just don't get or like, you know, maybe reread them again. Or maybe don't, you know, maybe your taste is not like your friends, and that's okay. You each are coming up with your own taste, and that's important. It's important also not to try and force yourself into liking something that you just don't, you know. Don't feel like you have to like a book because everyone else does, you know, really important. Some people are going to just love a certain book, you know, especially if it's like a really popular book, you know, maybe, but you may not like it, and that's okay too, you know, or you may like it and that's good. So learn to cultivate your own taste and your own values as a writer, because that is about what you want to express. It's very basic. 7 is understand when you write something honest, whether it's funny or sad or angry or whatever. It will help the person who reads it, for that person will probably have experienced something like that too. This is really important because I just felt, as a child, I always felt sad that you could not inhabit another person's body, that you were only in yourself. We're all in our own selves. You don't know what anyone else is thinking. So I think what's important is knowing that reading and writing is a way of connecting to someone. And it's a way of understanding what it is to be another person. And when you write something honest, it's a bridge. And whenever I've written something that feels like, you know, I feel, oh my God, I'm a freak, no one will understand this, people do. So I think really trusting honesty is really your currency as a writer. It makes writing feel alive, and it's really important. And which also goes for dishonest writing. If you write something that feels dishonest, or you think what you feel like people want to hear, that also become clear in the writing. 8 is find 1 or 2 writing buddies who will read your work for you. Call these people when you're feeling down about your writing or happy about it or anything. This is really key, again, because the writing process is long and the journey is, it's complicated and rocky, and I think if you have a couple people that are really helpful and really will be with you your whole way, that just creates a support network that's important, when you get bad news and good news too, that you want people that will be there, for you. 9 is learn patience. View rewriting as simply a task. Look for what's working and then think, what do I want to do another way? Rewriting means taking one thing at a time. It's just doing a job. So patience is one of the most undervalued things in our culture. I think, people write something and they want to get something out there, really quick, or they want to finish their novel, which of course novels I think are the hardest psychological undertaking in the world because they take so much patience and they take so much rewriting, and it's just so hard, especially in the culture of instant gratification, and writing is often about waiting and doing it over and over. But I think rewriting is really your path to becoming better. And if you see something, if you see something and don't think, how am I going to even start this? You do it one at a time, one thing at a time. You start at, the beginning or the middle, or, you give yourself a list of rewriting tasks, and you view it as just a job. So I think that's really important and will help your writing get better and better. I think often things with writing are not, things may get rejected because people haven't sat with them long enough. They needed another draft. And 10 is, remember, only you can write down your version of the world. And this is what I think is so beautiful about writing, is each one of us is unique and has never been on the world and never will be again. And writing is a way of sharing a little bit of yourself in this way that's forever. And also that shows who you are and your unique perception. I mean, it's amazing reading writers from, centuries or, cultures or experiences, and just finding something, that you connect with. It's just incredible. So I think valuing that importance and valuing what you have to say and that your version of the world is important and necessary, needs to be out there, is also something I tell myself. So so those are some of my thoughts on writing, and just keep going, and thank you for listening. Let's see. Hello? Am I on? Can you all hear me? Ben, can you hear me?
There you go. Yep. Sorry
Okay,
about
great.
that.
Okay.
You're all
Okay.
set, Karen.
Hi. So I'm now live?
You are now live. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Hi, that was just recorded. So now here I am. So thank you all for listening. Here's some great questions. First one is from Sarah Bach. How do you overcome writing block or moments of doubt? Which is a great question. And the point is, you never overcome it. It's always part of being a writer, because writing is hard. And I think one thing to do is you just need to, in certain ways, try and deny it. Again, that goes to the idea of delusion. I'm just going to write, but thinking, it's a process. I think the more you can think of it as a process, I think doubt becomes less urgent, because you realize you're going step by step and you can always go back. I know when I'm writing, and I just actually tweeted this thing about writing. It was like, the bad reading leads to good writing, the right writing leads to good writing recently, and people really liked it. And I think it was Frank Conroy at the Iowa Writers Workshop who said that. And it was so helpful because it's true. You know, things will start out, they will be, sometimes they'll be good, and sometimes, often, they won't be, or they'll be instead of labeling it bad, it's in process. So I think it's, doubt is a lot about, I think, worrying about it being good too soon. So I think the more that you can just stay with it and understand that it will change over time, you know, I think that that's been helpful to me. Next question. Rejections have been piling in. What's the best way to bounce back? Rejections are the worst, and they're constant. They never stop. You know, I think, how do you deal with rejections? One thing, I mean, I don't know if this is psychologically that healthy, but I'll sometimes say if they don't like it, they're idiots. And if they do like it, they're right. Which in certain ways, I don't know if that's so good, but it sometimes helps you move on. I think sometimes just, I think keeping things out there, you never know, you know, I think rejections and writing, finding a place for your writing is all about, it's all about taste. You know, one thing that you know, I'll be writing something and it may work for one magazine and not another, you know. I know I edit, I'm fiction editor for a journal called Scoundrel Time. We may get a lot of things that are good, but don't quite fit the theme of our journal, which is writing, engaging with the current political moment. So, so we've turned those down. So I think thinking about, you know, taste, fit for the magazine, maybe make sure that you send to a place, you know, that has work that you like, that maybe seems similar to what you're doing is helpful, but it's part of it. And I think in a way, just realizing that it is part of it, you know, might be helpful. You know, like actors have to go through, you know, millions of auditions and they get rejected from most. You know, writers go through a lot of rejection to place their work. It's so annoying. Next question. Has your writing process changed over time? Has it been very different writing in these strange times? From Carolyn Bach. Has my writing changed over time? I think it has. I mean, it changed when I was, you know, when I graduated from grad school. You know, I was juggling writing with jobs. When I became a mother, I was juggling it with, you know, teaching and kids, you know, and naps. Kids' naps became very important. Writing at night when they went to sleep was really important. I think my writing process is basically do it whenever I can, and just try and not be on the internet too much, which is always hard. I think, has it been harder in the pandemic that, and, you know, with everything going on in this crazy world now, I think it can be hard. It can be hard with the, you know, the crushing news coming at us all the time. And I think one thing I just try and tell myself, which isn't always easy, is that art is important and what we have to say is important. And it is healing, you know, and I think to remember that, and the world often tells us writing and our work is not important, to tell yourself it is important, and people need to hear you say things on all sorts of topics, you know, so keep doing it. Next question. Do I have to know some rules for writing a novel or play or any fiction, or just go ahead and write? From Nagwa Ibrahim Dawood. Oh, what a great question. I think it is good to just start writing. I think there are no rules. I think it is true. There are no actual rules. There are some books that are really good. There's a really great book, The Art of Subtext by Charles Baxter, which I often teach with, which talks about use of subtext in writing, and kind of gives you some examples. Another book I've been using in my teaching is Meander, Spiral, Explode by Jane Allison, which is about alternative forms of plot. It's a wonderful book about, and also looks to different novels and stories in terms of how you can structure them. So I think, you know, there are definitely, you know, craft books you can read, but ultimately the best teachers are books, and looking at how they're constructed and how they move forward. And, you know, how writers create characters. So I think really the best teachers are books that you love. Robert Siegel. Who are the new writers you're reading now? What do you recommend? And what magazines do you go to for new and relevant voices? These are great questions. New writers I'm reading now. I just started, I was just reading a recommended story list, and there was a book by an Italian writer from the 60s named Dino Buzzati called Catastrophe, which are these really weird, interesting short stories, kind of surreal. I've been reading Kafka. I've been reading The Trial. My daughter and I recently watched the HBO series, the Ferrante, about the Ferrante books, My Brilliant Friend, and I Started My New Name, which are incredible. And it's great to read the books and see the movie, both. So those are some things I'm reading. What journals do I go to? Well, I love Scoundrel Time, the one I'm editing. I think that is some great work. So many journals out there are great. The New Yorker has great stuff, the Atlantic, Granta, Paris Review. So many magazines, and I think just keep reading it. Guernica has wonderful things, Catapult, Electric Literature. So just read whatever whatever I think grabs you. Another one from Robert. You're both a short story writer and novelist. What's the difference between writing a short story and writing a novel? Great question. Difference between a short story and a novel. I think I read a definition once that said writing a novel is like writing about a community, and writing a short story is about a moment, something that changes. I think stories, it's interesting. I find my mind goes a little more easily towards stories, and because I can encapsulate them, as an idea, a moment. A novel is more, it's kind of, more thinking of all the questions that radiate out from a story. So with the novel, there's a lot more patience, and there's a lot more planning, which for me, and I tend to be sort of impatient, which is why I value patience so much as a writer, and I keep pushing it. It's harder, but a story, I think, is sort of focused more on a moment, something that shifts. And I'll tell students it's either something shifts in the main character, something shifts in the world outside the character, or time just goes on. There's stories where nothing actually necessarily changes, but the world of the story happens outside of the story. Oh my God, a lot of questions here. From Tabitha, I'm trying to find a critique group. I was unsuccessful in 2 previous attempts. Oh, it's frustrating. One to daytime location, other due to different book genre. How do I go about this? Is there a writer's website on Facebook group that could help me with my quest? Really interesting question, a critique group. It's interesting now with Zoom. I think there must be a lot of online critique groups. I wonder if, the Binders Full of Writers groups might have something. And I think going to, critique group, looking online to all different writing, places that offer writing classes. Catapult has really good ones. 1455 is going to offer some soon. I think looking at those, I think, are places to find critique groups. I don't know if there's a Facebook site, but there must be. Yeah, I think you could even Google Facebook book critique groups on Facebook and maybe find something. Rusty Thornsword, can you talk a little bit more about patience in regards to your work or to writing in general? Patience, it is everything, I think. I think it is about writing something and then stepping back and saying, I'm not done. and reading it or maybe showing it to someone and saying, you know, how do I make it better? And holding it. You know, I think the impulse often with writing, because we live in a culture that is so, you know, speed oriented, that's so, you know, are you published oriented, which is, you know, yes, everyone, you know, everyone wants to be published. You want to say something and have it out there and heard. Holding something until you feel like it's really good is worth everything, you know, because often with drafts, you know, as an editor at Scoundrel Time, or, you know, or, you know, with students, I see them doing drafts, and you see drafts get better. And then when they do maybe the fourth draft or fifth, then a story soars. So I think my own writing got a lot better when I said, I'm going to wait until it's a story that I'm really proud of. And then it's amazing. It really did get better. Let's see. I need the names of these books. Maybe we can text or email or, about the names of which books, the craft books, I think. The ones that are helpful, I thought were Craft Art of Subtext, uh, Meander, Spiral, Explode by Jane Allison, and also Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott is also really good. And The Art of Fiction by John Gardner is also a real wonderful book. Michelle Plachtes-Ryback says, are you writing anything right now? Books, articles. I am I am writing right now, both a new story collection I'm working on and a new novel, both kind of dystopian, surreal. Somehow that's something that I've been interested in now and what my reading is going to. So that's what I'm working on. How can we communicate with me? I have a website, karenebender.com. If you have any further questions, you can email me and I can answer them. Okay, the craft book I just mentioned. Okay. Okay. My email is on my website. Let me put the, yeah, okay. I'm going to put it in the chat Meander. Okay. Let's see, to all panelists in a team. All right. Meander, Spiral, Flowed by Jane Allison. Those are just some that I'm thinking of, but definitely you can absolutely email me and I can send other thoughts. How do you know which outlet to take your story? Book, short story, magazine article. How can you know where your writing would work best? From Melissa Mesky. What a great question. The answer is read the outlet first and really kind of get to know it and see, you know, if what you're doing is in line with what they're doing. You know, if, you know, journals vary so much, you know, some are more experimental, some are more realist, you know, some are more voicey. If you read them, then you can kind of see if their taste is aligning with yours. I know, you know, one big success I had as a writer was I was reading Granta, you know, and I loved what they were doing. I just loved their stories. And I had a story and I'd sent it to them and kind of miraculously they took it. But I think part of that was that I really respond to their work. And I think that is a helpful thing. If you feel like you're reading something and it's a really prestigious journal, but you don't really like their work, I think it's a sign maybe it's not a good fit. So I think fit is a really important thing as a writer. Karen Stewart, Meetup is a free online group where you can key in your interests and your location and you receive lists of meetup groups related to your interests. Interesting. Lots of these groups offer member critiques and workshops online and in person. What do you think of reaching out to these groups? How interesting. I don't know anything about these groups. I think everything, you know, is what the people are like. I think they can be really great or not, depending who's in it. So I think everything is worth trying, especially now when we're all sort of stuck. I think but I know, going to, kind of established writing places, Writers Extension, UCLA Writers Extension is great. Uh, the Writer's Voice at the 92nd Street Y is, just all these different writers programs are good to look at. Natalie White, what are you reading these days? Another book I want to say I'm reading, which is actually recommended by my husband Robert and his Robert Siegel, who is writing a wonderful blog on Japanese literature for Plowshares, is The Emissary by Yoko Tawada, which is an incredible dystopian, short, beautiful book. He recommended her. I'd never read her before, and she's just amazing. So it just, it's amazing, you're just going along and there's a writer that you just didn't know you'd love, and then you find them. Sayatani Dasgupta, how do you reward yourself after a good day of writing? I think I love going on walks, reading or relaxing. Reading is often a really nice way to reward oneself, or, bad TV is also very fun. And also just talking to people, I think writing's so internal. So a reward is often, communicating with people and talking to them. Let's see. When is your next book coming and what is it about? I don't know when my next book is coming. It's slow. It requires a lot of patience. And I don't talk about what things are about until they're almost done. So I think, it's a process, and it's fun. You just have to think about, what do you want to say? And I feel like, you see the importance of writing even more starkly in the pandemic, when we're, a lot of us are isolated and we can't see people the way we want, but books are there for us. You read a story and someone's with you. So I think realizing the importance of that, especially now. So I think that was all the questions. Or wait, there's more. Anonymous let's see. Okay, there's more questions. Anonymous entity, your writing tribe, the people who help shepherd your work to publication through critique, has that group changed for you over the years, or the same people since school? Oh, that's a great question. It varies. I have, I actually had a lot more readers for my work when I graduated from my MFA program. I sent to like a whole bunch of people, and then I realized I just needed a couple. And so I really just have like a couple of people I show my work to, one of whom I'm married to. And so I show Robert work and I see his work, and that's really great. And I have a couple friends that I show work to, and I don't think you need a lot of people. I think you really need people to just say, keep going, or, why don't you try this? And then and my editor is Dan Smetanka is very helpful, when I'm done, which is great. And then Melissa Misky, do you write longhand, on the computer, typewriter, or something else, or combination? Great question. I used to write more longhand, but now I really just write on the computer on a laptop. It's somehow what I do. I used to write on a typewriter, like when I was a freshman in college. I had my, manual or maybe electric typewriter. It was like a big thing to get. And I remember typing things over and over, and that was one way to revise. Like you could just do, delete. You had to type it over. And that was actually really interesting for the process. It made you see things over and over and what worked or didn't. So I think, is there any more? Oh, there's a couple more. Are there any other creative outlets you see yourself engaging in, particularly during the pandemic? Cooking, gardening, dancing, or art? Natalie, let's see. Well, doing a lot of cooking. Cooking is very creative. And also I do feel like as a writer, it's really nice to do things that are sensory. you know, because writing is so abstract. So do things that are very physical. We go on walks. I mean, it's so limited, you know, kind of what we can do. So there, you know, there's that, but yeah, so those are kind of some things. I think, are we out of time? I think that is it. Is there anything else? Okay, so I think that's it. Is there another question? Jen, hi. Do you have any suggestions on writing dialogue? I find it so difficult to write a dialogue with voices. Dialogue is hard. And I think one thing that helped me with dialogue is to think, what do people say that they're not supposed to say? Or how do they say things when they're trying not to say what they mean? So I think that is helpful if you think about what do people say, they just blurt and they're not supposed to say them. And I think that's always really revealing. And then how do people, you know, you think all the things that dialogue does, distracts, boasts, you know, confuses, and then also connects. You know, so you think about all the things people do with dialogue to try not to say exactly what they mean, you know, and speak around the truth. So I think we have to go. So thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciated your listening, and keep writing, and your work is important. So we need to hear it. So